Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic, here with another TuneUp, where I take one of your viewer-submitted decks and give it a tweak to help it better do what you want it to do. But before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody that we're now officially affiliated with our Canadian retailer of choice, Harry Tarantula. If you want to help support the channel by picking up singles or sealed product, head on over and use the promo code CMDR Space Mechanic at checkout. Now let's see what's in the workshop today. Premium patron JD writes, here's a $200 budget Elenda the Dusk Rose list that needs some help. I want to avoid an aristocrat-style deck and don't know what direction to take it in. My group has Soft Band, Soul Ring, and Aetherflux Reservoir, as well as infinite combos. Looking forward to seeing what you can do with this list. JD, first of all, thanks for supporting the channel. If anyone would like to work directly with me on tuning up your personal decks, consider becoming a patron. Head over to patreon.com/cmdrmechanic. Elenda is a commander that recently had some life breathed into her. Prior to this year's rules change about commanders triggering death conditions, Elenda was considered a laughingstock, not fit to head a deck, but decent in the 99. Now, with that one small rules change, she's a superstar. An Orzhov 1/1 for 4 mana, she comes with lifelink innately and grows whenever another creature dies. Pretty decent if you can keep up aggro or control your opponent's creatures. But the best is that now, when she dies, she triggers before being put back into your command zone. And with that trigger, she creates a small army of lifelinking vampire tokens with which to overrun your opponents. Normally, I'd recommend leaning into an aristocrat-style build right away, but JD has asked me to avoid that archetype specifically. So, no egregious sack outlets, no Grave Pack, no Dictate of Erebos. So how are we going to build this? Well, life gain would be a good route to go too. We can potentially gain a lot of life with Elenda and the tokens she makes, along with some natural vampire synergies. But one of life gain's major win cons, Aetherflux Reservoir, is Soft Band. So let's lean into tribal, heavy vampire synergies, a few lords, some ways to go both wide and tall, and we have ourselves a real direction for the deck. There's a lot of great stuff in the current list. I love the inclusion of the Sorens, not just for flavor, but for giving you some real ways to make your team more threatening, as well as ways to rebuild or capitalize off of the back of a board wipe. And some of the lords like Legion's Lieutenant and Vampire Nocturnus are great ways to make your whole army start taking real chunks out of life totals. Even creatures that start as 1/1s get beefy with these lords. Some of the tribal spells like Arterial Flow, New Blood, and Urge to Feed all add fantastic utility on your budget, as well as a very flavorful addition to any vampire tribal deck. But with the current list, it's looking like the curve is peaking at 4 casting cost. Lots of spells competing with your commander. At an average casting cost of 3.3 and very little ramp in white and black outside of the occasional ritual, we'd be looking at casting only 1 spell a turn until we hit turns 5, 6, or 7. Because of this, we'll want to trim some of the higher end cards that would be cluttering up those casting costs specifically. Anything over 6 is going to leave us pretty undefended against opponents with more interaction, and leave us in a position where we're playing a lot slower. I'd recommend removing Feast of Blood and Blood Tribute. Both are only conditionally good cards. Remember to think of cards with their value floor in mind rather than their value ceiling, like we saw in our Deck Building 101 series. These 2 cards are good if, not baseline good. So let's replace them with some cards that are more meaningful at all stages of the game, not just when you can meet optional conditions. Plague Wind is also very expensive from a casting cost standpoint. Sure, it's great to wipe away all of your opponent's creatures, but with selective board wipes, you can do that at a much discounted rate. Some of your creatures push casting costs needlessly high too. Haunt of Hightower, Vona, and Bloodline Necromancer are all okay creatures, but if you only get to cast one spell a turn, are these going to make the kind of impact to your board presence you need? I also want to cut the auras you've included in your deck. Auras in a deck that don't maximize their potential are just targets, opening up for easy 2-for-1 removals from your opponent. Sure, they're good if your opponent can't deal with them, but if they can, then you're really taking a turn off casting a spell that's not going to have a lasting effect. Now that we've freed up some slots, let's look at what we want to add in. I want to add in some notable vampires like Yahenni, Undying Partisan. While they can be used as an aristocrat's piece, in this case we want to use them as a hard-to-remove creature that grows in parallel to Elenda. The two synergize so well with each other that having both out can often just run away with the game. I'd also like to add in the new Nighthawk Scavenger from Zendikar Rising. This is a Vampire Nighthawk or Gifted Aetherborn on steroids. Like Vampire Nighthawk and Tarmogoyf had a baby. It is huge and evasive, and in a multiplayer game is a great threat for just 3 mana. Sanctum Seeker has also been added in. This is a great tribal way to turn your go-wide army into a win con without even needing to break through a ground stall. Just by attacking, no need to be successful, you can drain your opponents for large chunks of life at a time. Now I want to replace some of those conditional cards we talked about with some more flexible utility. One-time effects that serve 2 necessities, such as Village Rites and Culling the Weak, are very important. Not only do they draw cards or provide ritual mana, but they can also let you sacrifice Elenda at instant speed. This is important in case someone tries to exile Elenda with a Swords to Plowshares or a Reality Shift. Don't lose those hard-earned +1/+1 counters. Importantly, I also want to include another flexible board wipe. Since we removed Plague Wind, I want to replace it. You already have Dawn to Dusk in the deck list, so I want to include Austere Command. This way we can deal with pesky artifacts, enchantments, big creatures, or small creatures, whatever we need at the time. And for your mana base, I like that you're using almost all basics. Perfect for this deck's budget restriction. But let's toss in a Path of Ancestry too. Since its recent reprinting in Commander Legends, it has come down in price significantly and deserves a spot in any tribal deck. For upgrades, I could go the easy route here and recommend tutors. Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, and Enlightened Tutor, since they're just great ways to improve the consistency of any deck. Smothering Tithe is a softball recommendation too. These are staples in the colors at higher power levels, but overall boring recommendations. But specific to this deck, I would have a few upgrade paths. Starting with Anointed Procession. This white token doubler is great for your go-wide strategy and exploding off of the back of an Elenda death trigger. Cathar's Crusade is a favorite of mine that I always recommend to include in white go-wide decks, but many people can't handle the math associated with it, so I try to keep it to the upgrade section only. And lastly, Captivating Vampire. While it's not expensive per se, it is great in this kind of deck. Start scooping up your opponent's creatures, converting them to vampires, and send them back in for the kill. Your opponents may not appreciate being dealt lethal damage by their own commanders, but damn if it's not fun. A big thanks to our viewers for submitting these deck lists, and I certainly hope that this deck's owner is going to let us know in the comments below how they've chosen to tweak and tune this deck. And if you want to submit a deck for a tune-up, please reach out via email, via Twitter, or in the comments of this or any video. I make sure to read them all personally. Let's take a look at how we've chosen to tweak this list today. So we've brought the curve down from 3.3 to almost 3 even. This means that, on average, by turn 6, you'll be able to start casting 2 spells a turn. And when those spells are impactful removal or work to strengthen your board state, you'll notice a difference a lot earlier in most games. The baseline quality of some of your creatures has improved as well, ensuring they're more impactful initially, along with ensuring you have a few extra win cons that aren't specifically tied to a bulky Elenda. Yahenni and Sanctum Seeker in particular are going to be some of your backup plans. And lastly, I included Intangible Virtue in the deck to make the token-centric strategy a little tougher to beat. Your regular lords affect everything, sure, but Intangible Virtue increases the baseline value of many of your spells and abilities. This is multiplicative value. Definitely worth an include. I hope you end up making a few changes to the list, JD, and thanks again for choosing to support the channel. As always, folks, until next time, good luck and have fun. A huge thanks to all of our patrons for making this content possible. We couldn't do this here on the channel without your help. A special shout out to our Lodestone Golems this month, Ben Davis, Ben Frayne, Sterling Langford, and Will Briggs. And a special shout out to our Metalwork Colossi, Austin Charlotte, Charles Olson, and our newest premium patron, JD. If you want to become a patron and get a personalized tune-up, head on over to patreon.com/cmdrmechanic.